This is the Retro XP podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second generation with the Odyssey, Atari 2600, and Intellivision, all the way up to Gen 7 with the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii. Today on this episode, we'll be talking about one of the founders of Sega passing away late last year, reviews for the Commodore 64 Ultimate making their rounds online, some new pickups I got, what's coming out for remakes and remasters in January, and a look into 2026 and what we're expecting in remakes and remasters, and even some hardware that's expected this year. With that, let's dive right in. Retro XP is part of the Hair of the Dogcast network, so be sure to check out patreon.com/Hair of the Dogcast to check out every show the network has and get access to the exclusive community Discord. There is a free 30-day trial available if you want to try it out. Otherwise, you can follow me on X, Threads, Instagram, and YouTube at RetroX Podcast. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. I try to stay consistent with every Tuesday, but some weeks can get a little busy, especially since I'm on a couple other podcasts, so sometimes schedules get booked and then, my days off during the week get moved around. So apologies if it's not as consistent as, I'm more upset that it's not as consistent as I want it to be, but, I try my best. So yeah, let's get into some of the things I picked up lately. So over the last couple weeks, I've picked up actually quite a few things and quite a few random things. One game that I picked up that I've been looking at the game store that I've been frequenting is Robocop Versus Terminator for the SNES. This was an interesting crossover game between obviously the Terminator franchise and the Robocop franchise. And I remember the Super Nintendo game actually being pretty solid, pretty good side-scrolling game. I want to say you're basically the main protagonist is Robocop himself. And yeah, it's like a post-apocalyptic Detroit, so to speak, and the Terminator is wreaking havoc. So, who better to send to kill a robot, than Robocop himself. So the one thing that I loved the most about this game, honestly, was the box art. The box itself wasn't the standard SNES cardboard box. It was a big plastic chunky boy that, God, I don't even know how to describe it, but if you know, it looks really robust. For some reason, it's hard to find because, in the past, you would get a Super Nintendo game and, a lot of us just threw the boxes out because they're cardboard. They didn't seem like they would be, sufficient to or necessary to carry around. But the Robocop versus Terminator box, I would think, you would keep that because it's plastic. Kind of like almost like a Sega Genesis cartridge. So it's actually shocking how I just haven't seen more of the Robocop versus Terminator games with the box out in the wild. So that's one thing I do want to hunt for. Maybe I should, like I said, I mostly stay off eBay because I enjoy the hunt a little bit more than, just going on eBay and knowing that, I could just find anything I want on eBay, anything I'm looking for. But I kind of like the hunt a little bit. So, but another SNES game I got was Captain America and the Avengers. I want to say this is kind of like the Captain America and the Avengers arcade game. However, a very much dumbed down Super Nintendo version. Pretty solid. That was the era of the beat 'em up. We had Final Fight, Streets of Rage. We had X-Men, so many different types of X-Men and Marvel games, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So Captain America and the Avengers was pretty good. And, on the SNES, it was pretty solid. Another random one I got was Wario Land 4 for the Game Boy Advance. This completes my Wario Land series for the handhelds. I've had Wario. It's funny enough, Wario Land 1, 2, and 3 are on the Game Boy or Game Boy Color, so to speak. And Wario Land 4 made the jump to Game Boy Advance. So a lot of times when I'm looking for Wario Land 4, I'm looking in the Game Boy sections. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I keep having to remind myself it's a Game Boy Advance game. I should be looking at the Game Boy Advance section. And sure enough, how many times have I probably passed up Wario Land 4 over the last year or so, and just never thought to look in the Game Boy Advance section. And I mean, I don't know how you guys, if you guys are out there, kind of like, hunting for retro games at conventions or hunting at, local game shops, pawn shops, wherever. I have a problem to where there's not one particular system that I'm hunting for. To where some people out there be like, oh, I'm on the hunt for Nintendo games. I'm trying to do a complete NES collection, or I'm trying to do a complete Sega Genesis collection or something. I don't do that. I don't do full, complete collections. I'm kind of looking for games that I'm interested in. And unfortunately, the games that I'm interested in span multiple different generations, multiple different systems and platforms. So it's hard for me to be like, I got to go to this game store and I got to look at everything, instead of just like, hey, I'm on the hunt for Super Nintendo games. So all I'm going to do is focus on the Super Nintendo section. So it can be kind of daunting to think like, well, I'm looking for, and I have a wish list. I have a wish list on my phone. I have the Game Eye app, and that catalogs all the games that I have, and of course catalogs the wish list I have. So a lot of times I forget to pull it up, or I scroll through the wish list and maybe you skip a few things or whatever that you're looking for. And so yeah, like it's this is a kind of like a first world problem kind of thing, where I'm like, man, I just keep forgetting that I've been looking for this game for so long. So yeah, so now I have it. I feel like Wario Land was, I think, Super Mario Land 2, I believe that was, because that was kind of the introduction of Wario in the series, I believe. I think that's how that goes. So another game I got, another game, the game series that's been notoriously, I wouldn't say overpriced. They're good games, but I got Def Jam Vendetta for the GameCube, and I know Def Jam Fight for New York is a lot more expensive. I think I paid $45 for Def Jam Vendetta, complete in box. I want to say the place I got it from, I want to say that was a pricing error, he admitted, because he was like, oh no, I think I may have priced this wrong. Oh well. So, because I was shocked. I was like, wow, usually this is like $50, but I think he priced it without the manual, which isn't necessarily a deal breaker in many situations. So yeah, so I have Def Jam Vendetta. I want to get Fight for New York, but I don't know. We'll see. It is on my list. I do want it. I do feel like I want it, but $100 for a game like that is, it's a tough sell sometimes to yourself. For those that don't know, Def Jam Vendetta is a literal wrestling game with rappers within the Def Jam label. So you have characters that you can control, like DMX, Method Man, Redman, Ludacris, Nore, Capone, Scarface, Ghostface Killah, Joe Budden, and DJ Funkmaster Flex. In Def Jam Fight for New York, you got a lot more different characters, because I think with the success of Vendetta, it was getting, it was getting popular. So you had Snoop Dogg, you had Slick Rick, Lil Kim, Lil Flip, Ghostface Killah, Fat Joe, Mobb Deep, Ice-T, Exhibit, Busta Rhymes was in there, Bubba Sparks, Sean Paul. It was really cool that it's like, man, everybody was in here, and then even had like other celebrities in here. Henry Rollins was in there, Carmen Electra. So it was, they were fun games for what they were, and kind of like satisfying to see like, oh, what would happen in a wrestling match with Snoop Dogg against Method Man or something like that. So you don't have to be. I never played wrestling games growing up. I wasn't a wrestling WWF kid growing up. My friends were, but I really wasn't much into that. But I thought that was kind of a fun little thing. I wasn't into rap at the time, but I thought it was kind of fun. It was a fun, interesting pickup at Blockbuster at the time, and I was like, I kind of really liked this game. And then, of course, when Fight for New York was announced and it came out, I was like, yeah. So that's what I got for pickups. I know I got my eye on quite a few things. Now that the Christmas season is over, I can kind of get back into pickup mode. So hopefully you'll hear more about my pickups in the near future. So I talked about also that I've been, focused and dedicated so far on Retro January, and all I've been playing have been retro games. And with 8 days into it, I've been sticking pretty good with it. One of the first games I've been playing for the month was Resident Evil Code Veronica, and I'm on a Zombie Dogs podcast, so I thought jump. And one of the episodes that we were talking about just recently was Resident Evil Code Veronica. Came out for the Dreamcast first, and then came out for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube eventually after that. And you can play this game on modern hardware, but of course, sticking with the theme, fired up my Dreamcast. And of course, every time I fire up my Dreamcasts, I have that battery problem where the clock resets. So I know replacing the battery isn't hard. It's pretty easy, but I always forget to do it. So it's like every time I fire up my Dreamcast, I have to set the clock every time. And for those that don't know, that there's a kind of like a little, like one of those like coin-shaped batteries that powers the clock. And those batteries notoriously die pretty quickly. So I would say if you have a Dreamcast, most likely that battery is dead. And that's why you have to reset your clock every time you start it up. So, Resident Evil Code Veronica, you've heard me say it multiple times. I'm a big Resident Evil fan. Resident Evil Code Veronica isn't one of my favorites. However, it's one of the most important Resident Evil games in the franchise because we've rarely had a mainline game with a lot of supporting characters in it, because we always focus on the mainstays, the Jill Valentines, the Leon Kennedys, the Chris Redfields. With some of the newer ones, we're getting newer characters. We got, like, with 7 and 8, we had Ethan, a newcomer. With 9 coming out in a month from now, we're getting a different character. So along with another returning character. But it was cool to see a game where it's like, hey, you're playing as Claire Redfield now, and she's the main focus. And of course, the last half of the game, you're playing as Chris Redfield and uncovering this obviously larger conspiracy of what's happening with Umbrella and how it's kind of going downhill. But this was the first Resident Evil game that had fully rendered 3D backgrounds. Obviously, it was the jump to the new hardware, so you had smoothed out textures. It wasn't the jaggy bits that the PlayStation was very notorious for. So I mean, when this game came out at the time, oh my god, was my mind blown. I was like, look at these graphics, man. You can actually make out character details. You can make out the backgrounds a little bit better, even though some of the areas were a little bit foggy, a little bit dark, and I don't want to say muddy, but like it wasn't as detailed as like, some games you see now. But it was great for what we had at the time. Like, it also had a moving camera. It had the tank controls, and it had stationary cameras in a lot of areas, but for the most part, when you're moving around the levels, the camera's moving with you, as opposed to the stationary cameras that we got with the original titles. So I had fun with this. I want to say the last half of the game with Chris Redfield's campaign can get a little frustrating, especially if you don't plan for the inevitable character switch. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, because it's been years since I played Code Veronica and I forgot about it. So I had fun with this. I want to say I got like 75% of the way into it. And then I just moved on to other things like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. I beat this game once in my life, years ago when I was a kid. And I haven't beaten it since, but I've replayed this game many times. This is my favorite Legend of Zelda game of all time, still to this day. I know other great Legend of Zelda games have come out since, like Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild, even Wind Waker. Wind Waker surprised me. I didn't play Wind Waker until it came out on the Wii U, and I couldn't believe I missed out on it when it was on the GameCube. But to me, Link to the Past still will hold the trophy for my favorite Legend of Zelda game of all time. And other games will come close. I gotta say, other games will come close, but I think Link to the Past was a lightning in a bottle for me. And in the last episode, I was playing the game as I was talking about the game. And the one thing I liked about Link to the Past ending, and I didn't mention it before, and this isn't really a spoiler for the ending, because ultimately in the end, you defeat Ganon and everything gets restored back to normal. back to the way it used to be, because that's the power of the Triforce. Make a wish, your wish comes true. And what I liked is that at the end of Link to the Past, a lot of those small characters, a lot of those small stories wrapped up, with like a cool little like small cutscene or something like that of like, the flute boy or the old man on the mountain, or even like the two blacksmiths, if you reunited them, because you can speed run through this game and miss a lot of this stuff, but and you won't get these cutscenes. You won't get these moments of like, hey, this is what happened when you finally reunited the blacksmiths, or if you didn't do certain things with characters before, like there was like a certain thief that you find out is like back to his thieving ways in the desert, and if you didn't find out that he was an actual thief, then you wouldn't have seen that cutscene. So I did a full completionist run with this. So I actually downloaded a guide that guided me literally step by step on like how to do a full completionist run. So I got all the weapons, I got all the upgrades, I got all the hearts. I was fully maxed out, but that level 8 Ganon's Tower was such bull, man. I hated that. I hated that tower so much, because it was like all the other towers, all the other dungeons, we're fine, whatever. Like I played through a good portion of it, but I want to say I think I only did Ganon's Tower once in my life when I actually went to beat it, and man, was that challenging to say the least. But real satisfying ending. I gotta say. So I love it when a game kind of wraps up small little things. And then, it's like, hey, you remember this thing? Well, this is what happens with that. Or remember that thing you did or that person you met? Well, this is what happens to them after you beat the game. So it was really cool to see that. I was like, kind of like, big smile across my face looking to see like, oh, hey, the flute boy's alive now, even though that was like I remember that was a devastating thing for me to experience when I was a kid the first time I played it. And if you know, you know. But even like, the old man on the mountain, like, oh, how's he doing up there? So after I beat that game, I was like, okay, well, I got 45 minutes before I kind of want to go to bed. So I went and fired up Darkwing Duck for the NES. That was a short game. Oh, man, I love that game so much. Capcom Disney, during the Nintendo days, they were killing it with this game. I think, and then, Rescue Rangers and DuckTales, man, they were so good at, games at the time. I mean, Capcom was killing it at that point for me, and Darkwing Duck was definitely a notable game that wasn't hard by any means. Like it wasn't a challenging game. It was simple enough that you could get through it within a day. And like I said, I knocked it out in 45 minutes to an hour. So much fun. It has its challenges. It's got its platforming segments and, tons of different enemies, all with predictable patterns that it's like, once you get it down, it's like, okay, all right, this is how you do it. And I had a lot of fun with this. Honestly, I wish, say what you want about short games. I love short games. If they're fun, to me, I don't care how long it is, and it's like one of those things. It's like, hey, I could just pick this up and play it again. And granted, it may not be the same as like the first time you played it. Like I would say, I don't remember the last time I played Darkwing Duck ever. Like it's has to have been years, but I was like looking at my shelf and I started in the Nintendo section and I was like, Darkwing Duck, man, I love this game for the longest time when I was a kid. So hearing the familiar, theme song from the cartoon and obviously interacting with all the different characters, a lot of the main villains from the cartoon series made their presence known and in the game. So it was really cool. And then I started out with Dino Crisis, and I started playing that. I haven't finished much into it yet, but another game I want to talk about is Shinobi Legion for the Sega Saturn. I was looking at my Sega Saturn collection, and I was like, Shinobi Legion was a game I completely missed out on when it came out, which is weird because I was a big Shinobi fan growing up and now to this day. So I fired up Shinobi Legion, and it was cool because it had full motion video segments in between a lot of the missions. and it really fleshed out a really good story. Like it was full motion video at the time was like, before we got these like elaborate 3D cutscenes. But of course, they were probably a lot more expensive to make at the time. But it was really cool because, Shinobi was a real person in this point. And, old games at the time, and even now to this day, where it's like the first 75% of the game is kind of like easy to medium. And then all of a sudden at the end, it drains your credits, it drains your continues, and it gets like almost like stupidly hard. But it gets to a point where it's like, it's hard, it's frustrating, but once you nail it, the platforming segments or even like the enemies and the bosses, once you nail it, you're good, you're set, and it becomes almost simple, like it, almost muscle memory to a point. So had some interesting platforming segments, a lot of BS enemies, there was a level in the end where you're running through the mountains and you got these, birds that are flying and attacking you from the air. If you know Ninja Gaiden, the birds in the Ninja Gaiden series are some of the worst enemies in video game history, and this is no exception. These are a little bit easier to dispatch than the birds in the Ninja Gaiden series, but still annoying, still frustrating because a lot of times you can't see when they're hitting you. But there's it was actually a pretty solid Shinobi game. Like, it's a shame that it got the Saturn wasn't popular at the time, so a lot of people missed out on this. Like I did. I would say I only discovered that Shinobi Legion was a game until like maybe like a couple years ago when I saw it in the store, and I was like, "There's a Shinobi game for the Saturn? How did I miss this?" And admittedly, I only started getting into the Sega Saturn just recently, so I haven't. I never had a Sega Saturn growing up, and it was definitely a generation that I skipped at the time because I had a PlayStation, and then of course when the Dreamcast came out, I was like, hey, all right, Sega's still got a stake in the game for as long as it had. So yeah, otherwise, solid game. I got to the end, ran out of credits, and I'm like, do I want to do this run back again? And I was like, no, I'm good. Which it's frustrating because you get to the end, you lose your credits, literally last level, and I'm like, I don't have enough Steam. So maybe I'll go back to it again and try it again. So obviously my run through will be a little easier this time around. So, but yeah, that's really pretty much what I've been playing so far. The plan is I do want to continue on with Dino Crisis. Like I said, I only played like the first like 45 minutes of it so far. So I do want to continue playing that. And really, I don't know. I have plans to play the Ratchet and Clank games for the PS2, maybe some Jack and Daxter games, because I picked those games up in a recent pickups video that I did when I did the Arkansas trip, if you remember. And I mean, who knows? I basically look at the walls, look at my shelves and see what stands out. So I want to focus on games I've never played before, and also sprinkling in maybe some games that kind of want to play again. So yeah, so that's really what I've been playing. Let's jump into the news now. So the co-founder of Sega, David Rosen, passed away recently at 95 years old. He was surrounded by his family, and he passed away on Christmas Day, unfortunately. He was 95 years old, like I said, and one of the original founders of Sega. And this is according to Time Extension. And Sega made a tweet about this recently, saying in the tweet, "We are deeply saddened to learn of the passing of David Rosen, one of the founders of Sega and a true pioneer in the video game industry. Sega would like to offer its condolences to the family, friends, and acquaintances, and we will always remember his contributions." Another prolific Sega, name, Yuzo Koshiro. He's the composer of a lot of really good Sega Genesis games like Streets of Rage 2, ActRaiser. Recently just did a side-scrolling shooter with Eartheon, which actually runs on Sega Genesis hardware. So, but that's a story for another day. He made a tweet as well. He said, "It was Sega that led me led the me of my student days into the dreamlike space called the Game Center, a massive presence in my life. And I want to say this is, he probably made this tweet in Japanese, but this was translated. So I'm reading this word for word. I'm sorry. The memories of playing countless arcade games remain deeply etched into my soul even now. Without the culture that Sega built, especially the achievements of the Mega Drive era, neither I, myself, nor our company, Ancient, could have come this far. With deep gratitude and respect for Mr. David Rosen, I sincerely pray for his eternal rest. And so I looked up a little bit of interesting stuff about David Rosen because he served in the United States Air Force between 1948 and 52, and he was primarily based out of Japan, and obviously served in the Korean War a little bit as well. And then he ended up just returning to Japan and started Rosen Enterprises. And this is according to David Rosen's Wikipedia page. And he was focused on selling art created in Japan to the American market and photo studios for Japanese identification cards as well. And that photo business was called Photorama. And Rosen established studios in hundreds of locations all over Japan. And Rosen Enterprises ended up shifting its focus and pioneered the basically the coin-op amusement machines into the United States, from the United States to Japan to meet this like growing leisure market. Now obviously at this time life's getting a little easier, so a lot of people have more free time. So it's you got a lot of these opportunists that are coming in and coming up. This is basically the start of games, pinball machines, all this stuff. So in 1965, Rosen Enterprises merged with Nihon Goraku Busan, and they ended up making the brand name Sega. And the name originates Service Games, Japan. So SEGA, Sega. And I didn't know that. I was doing this research. I was like, oh, okay, so that's where Sega comes from. So Sega, Service Games, Japan, for their jukeboxes and slot machines. And after the merger of the two companies, Sega Enterprises was then established, and Rosen became the chairman and chief executive officer of this resulting company. And then in the year later, basically, Sega Enterprises created its first original game called Periscope, which led to the introduction of 25-cent play in the United States. So the arcade games have been 25 cents for almost 50 years. 50 years. So talk about, beating inflation at this point. So basically, in 1969, Rosen and his partners agreed to sell Sega Enterprises to Gulf Plus Western Industries, and in 1970, Rosen still remained CEO of this company. Basically, after so many years and so many passing of the hands, Sega's U.S. coin-op division was sold to Bally Manufacturing Corporation. So, and then during this time, Rosen had moved to Los Angeles after living in Japan full time for many years, and he didn't want to solely purchase Sega Enterprises at this time. This was in the early 80s, but instead Rosen and Hayao Nakayama put together a buyout group that led to the purchase of the company, Sega, in 1984. Okawa became a chairman, and Isao Okawa, who was part of the purchase group, and Nakayama became president of Sega Enterprises. And then, Rosen remained in the States, and he was running basically Sega of America at this time. This is when Sega America began, and he was chairman of Sega America and a little bit of Sega Japan too as well, up until 1996 when he resigned from both. So yeah, prolific man, and obviously a pioneer in the video game industry, and just how things just started, from the start with just, coin-op machines, and then, one thing led to another, and then all of a sudden now we have, where we had a Mega Drive, we had Sega Genesis, and we got Sonic, and we have a lot of, we got Sega obviously as now like a first-party publisher, so it's, or I should say third-party publisher, and they're still killing it to this day. While they're not in the hardware space anymore, they're still a big influence on a lot of our lives. So I wish David Rosen's family my condolences, And the fact that he was such a prolific person in many people's lives, even to this day, is a testament to his character as well. So, you heard me on a previous episode talk about the Commodore 64 Ultimate. Long story short, if you want the full story, check out one of my previous episodes where I talk all about the Commodore 64 and the Commodore 64 Ultimate, because the company was basically repurchased, rebought out with a lot of the old dogs that were big with the Commodore 64. And then now we have a couple new kids in the works, or new kids in the mix, literally making the Commodore 64 again. It's full keyboard and everything. Plugs into TV, plugged into a monitor, whatever. And it was worked on this summer and was slated to come out this year, which was actually a quick turnaround between basically people buying it and then, to production right away. So reviews are in, and so far it's actually been pretty good. A lot of people have been praising it. For example, IGN, the reviewer said it's the most astonishing retro product I have ever reviewed, which if you go on IGN, sometimes their reviews can be a little bit hit or miss, but I think that's subjective. I think that depends on what you're looking out of it. Some highlights, he said, basically, the system offers so much more beyond just a simple remake. So I talked about before, you can actually make music with this. It's got excellent HDMI output, goes far beyond expectations, and the fact that it's so authentic to the original is what impressed him as well. Tom's Hardware, the website Tom's Hardware, basically called it a beautiful love letter to the era, saying very easy to use, case faithfully matches the original, and even though some of the color options, like the beige option, looks kind of lame, still says it looks great. One of the cons is obviously the high initial cost may deter some buyers. This system can run between $300 and $400 depending on the version that you get. So when you think like you could probably buy a used Switch for much cheaper than that, or even like other used hardware, it's kind of tough, especially since it's not like the Commodore 64 has stellar graphics or anything like that. So, but yeah, otherwise, it looks like they enjoyed it. Games Radar Plus, said, quote, the remake enthusiasts deserve. It also said the same thing. It's pricey, but definitely delivers on its promise on what it was doing. This is the definitive microcomputer remake. There have been other Commodore 64-like emulators and hardware in the past that just used the name kind of like as a selling point. But the fact that this is actually made by the actual Commodore 64 company lends itself to be almost like this is the definitive. If you want to play Commodore 64 games, this is what you need to get, because this plays all the old cartridges. Retro RGB, Modern Vintage Gamer actually did a video on this, and obviously we talked about it, this being an FPGA based system, and this is not software emulation, this is full hardware emulation. Says it performs extremely well. Basically, he had a few complaints about the keyboard on the Starlight Edition, which is like, I think like a clear casing with a lot of cool lights on it. And maybe the keyboard functionality wasn't up to their standards. But yeah, overall said it's one of the best modern recreations of the original 64 experience. Time extension, it says the gold standard of retro computer revivals. Basically said all the same stuff. It's doing well. I want to say probably the biggest complaint people have been having has been the price point. The Commodore 64 is a niche system. It's a very niche system. This wasn't like a big seller at the time like Nintendo or Mega Drive was. So, and it's not something that it's like, oh man, $350, $400, I'll get that. It's, this is a very niche product for a very niche market. And me growing up, I don't have an attachment to Commodore 64. I never had one growing up. It was out when I was way too young. But, for the, older video gamer, maybe remembers playing their dad's Commodore 64, or if you're, in your 50s and you remember having one as a kid, like, it sounds like this is a must have for you. If you still have your old Commodore 64 games, and apparently I think Tom's Hardware even said it himself, that the cartridges work extremely well, almost like, flawless, so to speak. This is a must have. It sounds like, if you're a Commodore 64 fan. So I'm glad this is doing well. Last but not least, according to Time Extension, and according to a tweet by Pirate Nation, apparently the Nintendo 3DS XL, the new Nintendo 3DS XL specifically, has been jumping up in price lately. And it's honestly not shocking. Because the new Nintendo 3DS XL is a pretty amazing piece of hardware. And I want to say, a lot of people have made comments about, when you create a piece of hardware that is almost impossible to emulate by standard means, like, if you were to emulate it on PC, or even on like a small handheld, or even on your TV, there's 3DS games, and even just regular DS games, that you just can't port to the Switch or anything like that. I would say the majority of them you can't, because of that touchscreen functionality that's required in a lot of games. So it's of no surprise that, people that had 3DSs at the time, and Nintendo 3DSs at the time, are starting to find a little bit more disposable income and want to jump back into, a lot of the and I'm generalizing here, but jump into a lot of the Pokemon games, or even some of the other, like, cool Nintendo 3DS games out there. I actually, one of the games I picked up that I didn't talk about was Shovel Knight for the 3DS. But yeah, a lot of cool games on there. The storefront is closed, unfortunately, so you can't download a lot of the digital games, but there are some pretty good, like, new 3DS XL games out there. Actually, GameSack on YouTube just did a video just last week on all of the exclusive new Nintendo 3DS XL games that were on it. Some are fine, some are really good. Hyrule Warriors was an interesting one, I know, at the time, and Xenoblade Chronicles X ran pretty well. But, once again, it was a handheld at the end of the day, and it's not like you needed like full AAA experiences on this thing. So, according to what I've been seeing on eBay, we're seeing, like, say, for example, new 3DS XL Galaxy Edition is going for $280. Some are going between $300 and $400. If you get to the more specific ones, like the Legend of Zelda one, those are going for like $450. Complete in box, we're jumping up into the 500s now at this point. But admittedly, it's all over the place. And like the regular black version, I see, like, well, there's metallic blue one here for $192, but that one comes from Japan, so I think that's Japanese only. $300 for the black console, the US version. The red one, we're talking $350. The Super Nintendo version, the Super Nintendo 3DS XL, that one's going for $420. Looks like a complete in box new Nintendo 3DS XL, the Galaxy Edition. That's $500. Wow, these are all over the place. So, the Super Mario Brothers 2 edition handheld, looks like that's going for $300. So for the price of a Switch, you can get a 3DS XL, a new 3DS XL. And if you want to know what the difference between a 3DS XL and a new 3DS XL, is obviously it's got higher processing power, so you can play, specific games that you can't play on your old 3DS XL or old 3DS period. It's got a little nub on the upper right for like camera control and maybe some other functions. And then it's got an extra bumper buttons up at the top. So, and then also new 3DS XLs can play Super Nintendo emulated games. Although another reason why I think people are getting these two as well is that, the modding scene is getting to be, pretty good out there now. A lot of people are modding these 3DSs. A lot of people are picking up old PSPs, old PlayStation Vitas, modding them and making them, making them be like emulation machines. And, these are powerful emulation machines. I want to say I have the original 3DS. And I think I bought it from a friend of mine for $40 years ago and completely jailbroken. It's got a bunch of games, a bunch of old games loaded onto it and stuff. And I think even a couple 3DS games. I actually haven't fired it up in a while, so I got to see what's on there. But I mean, it's all software emulation. You don't have to do any soldering or any trickery with it. You just jailbreak it with a SD card and away you go. So there's that for you if that's interesting to you. So let's get out into some releases. What are we expecting? This month? So old but new, but also old, but still new for some of you. Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming to the Switch 2 and the Xbox Series systems on January 22nd. This was a PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 exclusive pretty much from the start. And it's now, we all knew it was going to be eventually coming to all the different systems. So now Xbox fans are going to be playing it. And Nintendo fans are going to be playing it. I mean, when you think about it, Final Fantasy got its start on Nintendo hardware, but Final Fantasy VII was exclusive to the PlayStation and PC as well. But that was the only way to play Final Fantasy games for the longest time, at least the mainline entries. They were all on original PlayStation hardware. So now we're getting the remake, which I imagine, the Rebirth will also be getting a port to these systems at some point, maybe next year, maybe later this year. So on January 22nd, you can get this for the Switch 2, and you can get this for the Xbox Series systems. This obviously includes the Integrate DLC as well. It also has it's also going to be bundled in with like some quality of life features. Like, obviously it's going to have an easy mode, and then, which I think the original ones did, but it's going to have like, invincibility modes. I think you can like put cheat codes basically on to make yourself more powerful. Just almost like if you're the type of person that it's like, I want to play the game, but I kind of want to run through it quickly. So, these kind of things are pretty divisive. Some people, when they want to do replays of games, they want to put it in easy mode. Admittedly, I do that sometimes. If I'm like, I want to replay this game, but I don't want to spend a lot of time with it, I'm just going to run it on easy mode just to kind of have fun with it and experience it. I always think like your first experience with it should be playing it as the game is intended on normal difficulty or, whatever. So, So, if you wanted to play the game again and play it on new hardware, here's your chance. And you can also give yourself some quality of life improvements. Front Mission 3 Remake is coming for all systems now. This came out exclusively on the Switch earlier this past year. But this is now coming to PC, Xbox One, and Series systems, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5 on January 30th. So I think we're getting a Switch 2 version maybe later this year. I heard this one did not get reviewed very well, so maybe this is something that not a lot of people are interested in, but it's a slow month for releases. January's not notorious for kind of being slow. In terms of releases, and especially it sounds like for remakes and remasters, that's where so once February hits, that's when we'll start kind of like talking about a lot of different remakes and remasters coming up. So in terms of if you have modern hardware, if you're a PlayStation Plus Classic subscriber, you're getting Epic Mickey Rebrushed. This was a Wii exclusive game way back. And it's had a remaster for a while, but now you can actually download it for free if you're I think this is part of their free monthly games. You don't have to be an Essentials member or a, premium member or anything like that. This is just a free game that you're getting. So if you remember Epic Mickey from the Wii back then, they remastered it and now you can actually play it. Xbox Game Pass, you're getting Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster this month. You can buy the collection that has the 1 through 6 in it. But with this one, you can just, it's just, if you're a Game Pass subscriber, you can just get the first Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster. Nintendo Switch 2 online got Wario World for the GameCube. This looks like kind of like a 3D not open world, but maybe open zone, kind of like action platformer. And I mean, do I need to tell you anymore? It's a Wario game. You can expect some zany antics here. Wario is trying to collect all the gold, and yeah. So this is obviously exclusive to Switch 2 because this is a GameCube title, and the GameCube software is only playable on the Switch 2. Just to FYI. So yeah. So let's dive into our main talking point. So one of the cool things about being retro gamers is that the ever expanding collection of games that are coming out now that will soon be retro in 20 years. Is kind of crazy that I'm playing games right now that have come out this year or last year even, and in 20 years we're gonna be looking at this like, man, this is so retro. Like it kind of blows my mind a little bit. But not only that, within these new games that are coming out now, if you're still kind of in the know playing new games, we're seeing remakes and remasters that are taking our favorite old games and just reimagining them for modern gamers out there. In many cases, though, there are no ways to play the original titles unless you buy an old system and you buy the game secondhand, or you've hung on to them for so long. Which, if you want to, buy an old game or an old system, good luck, because sometimes they can be hard to find or expensive. And for some, the games can even be unplayable, especially if you're used to modern sensibilities like control schemes, save states, graphic resolution, so on. You can buy old hardware and try to play it on your new TV, and it just looks like garbage. And you've heard me talk about, getting these upscalers that can cost a couple $100 that can make the game somewhat playable and somewhat look good on your TV. And then, of course, there's emulation, which we don't need to talk about that any more than we have to, because everyone knows, you can just emulate it on your PC and have a lot of quality of life adjustments and improvements there. But sometimes there's nothing like holding the actual system controller in your hand and experiencing those, little things that are known with the system, like, firing up a PlayStation, firing up a Nintendo 64, those little caveats, those little quality of life things that you just love to have. So so with that, we get remakes and remasters that get released every so often that can change the game for us in a variety of ways. The first remake I ever remember seeing was Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which took the first 3 Mario Brothers games for the NES and gave them a SNES coat of paint in terms of graphics, control, music, and more. Like it was like basically playing the same game but different. And it was interesting because, especially if you had muscle memory with a lot of those original games, that didn't transfer over very well. And I think I also remember Ninja Gaiden Trilogy at the time as well, which didn't change too much. I want to say it was more of like a port, if anything. And even Mega Man The Wily Wars for the Genesis, we never actually saw it here in America, but I played Wily Wars for the I have a physical copy of Wily Wars for the Genesis that was re-released, I want to say a few years ago, playing it on my Genesis, and it's different. It's Mega Man 1, 2, and 3 packaged in one game, and it's just different. It doesn't control the same, but it's updated, modern graphics and everything. Of course, nowadays we are seeing full top-down remakes becoming more commonplace, and while in my eyes, still being a person that plays modern games, I wish developers would just make new games in these universes. I mean, I still like that a new and younger generation can enjoy games that I used to enjoy, in many cases, still do enjoy, at all at the same time, and enjoying them myself. And you got people that grew up my age. I mean, I don't have children of my own, but people growing up my age that having kids of their own, and then telling them like, hey, these are the games I used to play as a kid, and maybe going back to playing those games for some kids can be a little challenging, but I think it's a little bit easier for them to pick up and play a new game than it is for us to maybe like pick up and play a game that's 30 years old, and we have these kind of like rose tinted glasses that it's like, man, at the time I felt like younger. When I was younger, it felt different, and maybe I was in a different headspace at the time. So, but that's, like I said, that's all subjective. That's all in your head. So, Two of my favorite games of all time, which if you listen to my top 10 episode, you'll know, Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill 2 got remakes within the last few years. And while I hold those two to be very near and dear to my heart, I gotta admit, I was pretty skeptical in the remakes being faithful adaptations to the original titles. I was like, you don't screw these up, guys. Don't screw these up. So I want to say especially Silent Hill 2. I hold that a little bit closer to my heart. Both, I wanted them to both retain as much of the original game in the remakes, all the while providing something a little new, but both remakes blew it out of the water for me. And while I still prefer their original versions over the remakes, I'm still grateful we got a reimagining of sorts for them. It was like we didn't need remakes for both of them, but I'm not also sad that we did. These remakes and remasters are becoming more and more commonplace now for developers as like I said earlier, as the average gamer age gets higher and higher every year. And I think we should look into the future, the year that we're in right now, 2026, to see if one of your favorite games in our franchises is getting a remake or remaster. But to start, you're listening to this episode and you may be thinking like, well, is that a remake or a remaster? What's the difference? Remake for me, and the way at least I see it identified as, we're talking a remake is a top-down, inside and out development of a game that has already been released. For examples like the two I mentioned earlier, Resident Evil 2 remake and Silent Hill 2 remake, were full top-down, like unrecognizable compared to, maybe not fully unrecognizable, but basically it's not the same as the original game. Final Fantasy VII remake, Metal Gear Solid Delta, Snake Eater, Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, Shadow of the Colossus. Those are all remakes. Fully top-down, complete, from start to finish, new development. Remasters are just simply taking an already developed game and just maybe giving them a fresh coat of paint. Like taking the code and just improving a few things. Slightly upgraded visuals, smoother frame rate, upping resolution, or even just porting them to modern hardware, and kind of like that lazy way. And these can include like Metroid Prime Remastered, Halo the Master Chief Collection. We had the Tomb Raider remasters just recently, and of course the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. There's so many others. The two can get muddled a bit with remasters and remakes. It's like, is this technically a remaster or is this technically a remake? You have some remasters that got a lot more work done than others, like the Dragon Quest 2D HD remasters, or remasters that have barely anything done to them, like the Metal Gear Solid collection. A lot of people complain that this was like, oh, this is just a port. And it's like, well, kind of. But it's not a full, like, oh my God, they improved a lot of the graphics or anything like that. It was just literally straight port. So I'm sorry, I keep snapping this episode. All right, so let's hit the list. First one's very big rumor at this point, so it takes us with a grain of salt. But it's reported that Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are getting remakes this year. Similar in fashion to how Elder Scrolls Oblivion got one last year. The TV show on Amazon Prime is doing really well. It's a really good show. If you're a Fallout fan, I highly recommend you watch it. I think the developers want to cash in as much as possible with these two titles. So these are probably the two most beloved Fallout games, I think, in the series. Yakuza 3 is getting a remake. Yakuza Kiwami 3. This Yakuza 3 came out on the PS3 in 2009 and returns fans to Kazuma Kiryu and the crime-laden streets of Kamurocho. He finds himself in the midst of a turf war, which is basically the premise of every Yakuza game. I've never played a Yakuza game. I would say the only games I played in this universe were the Judgment games. But this is definitely something that I feel like it's been on my radar, and at some point I will have to play. So this also has the DLC Dark Ties, which will be included in the game. So there's other Yakuza remakes actually as well. So if you're a Yakuza fan back in the PlayStation 2 and early PS3 days, there's a lot of stuff out there that you can play right now. Tomb Raider Legacy of Atlantis is another reimagining of the first Tomb Raider game. If you recall, we already had a remake of the first game, Tomb Raider Anniversary. This came out on the PlayStation 2 back in 2007. And then, of course, it was ported to the 360 later on. This looks like a full-bore, inside-and-out remake, reimagined Lara Croft. So no pointy boobs in this one. But she still retains much of her classy look and that determination that she's always been well known for. Revamped puzzles, larger locations, I mean, the trailer looks gorgeous, if that's any indication of gameplay. Actually, 2026, Tomb Raider is celebrating its 30th anniversary, so the time is right, actually, for Lara Croft to cement her place as one of video games' most iconic protagonists. And if you want to hear more about Lara Croft, actually, I recorded an episode, a Lara Croft Icons episode, earlier in my catalog. So check that out if you want to learn a little bit more. We don't have a release date yet for this, just like with Yakuza Kiwami. I didn't see a release date unless I completely missed it. But this is set to come out on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is a remake of the original game. This game came out in 2000 for the original PlayStation. Of course, at the time, in America, it was named Dragon Warrior 7. And it did get a 3DS remaster in 2016. So what we're expecting with this is Dragon's Quest VII Reimagined. It's going to be bringing timeless classic life in a whole new way with these diorama-looking visuals, updated gameplay mechanics, and a streamlined story. And with that, it's looked to streamline much of the gameplay as well, from what I hear. Because I never played the original one. Actually, I'm going to confess I've never played a Dragon's Quest game ever in my life. However, I hope for that to change at some point this year. I did grab a copy of Dragon's Quest III HD Remake. I hope I'm saying that right. So I do plan on playing that this year because I feel like I should be playing at least some of the Dragon's Quest games. But I hear the game and campaign can be pretty long and tedious. So if you want to, play originally the way it was intended, you can, or you could turn off a lot of, you could turn on a lot of quality of life improvements. So the graphics honestly look amazing in this, and it's set to come out soon, actually, February 5th for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, Switch 1 and 2, and the PC. You can actually download a demo of this right now of the beginning part of the game, and it can actually translate over to your save can actually transfer over to the game when it comes out. So Dynasty Warriors 3 is getting a remake in a completely new engine. It's coming to Xbox Series, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch 1 and 2, and the PC on March 19th of this year. This game was released in 2001 for the PS2 and Xbox and considered a fan favorite amongst fans and critics. And if you know Dynasty Warriors, basically it's like hack and slash gameplay of just like one man army like decimating hundreds and hundreds of enemies on the screen. Basically they upped it now with all the modern hardware capabilities. Now it's now 1,000 versus 1 combat, and it's an Unreal Engine 5. So it looks like it's going to feel like a whole new game. So I want to say Dynasty Warriors is almost on a comeback because we got Dynasty Warriors Origins that came out, I want to say, last year. So it sounds like if you had a lot of fun with this, they're still going strong with the series. Halo Campaign Involved is coming this year, and now up on the PlayStation system. It's shocking. I can't even say it without shaking my head. It's just something it's a sentence I never thought I'd ever say in my life. But this seems to be an attempt for Halo Studios to rebrand the franchise and bring it to as many gamers as possible. If you agree with that sentiment or not, it's fine. I don't agree with it. I think Halo should have stayed on the Xbox, but whatever. A full-on remake of the original's campaign is what's to be expected here, with a few quality of life improvements, like new weapons, the ability to sprint, and an extra seat in the Warthog. So for 4-player co-op. And of course, a lot more obvious changes, like, full top-down graphics, sound, music. They're retaining a lot of the original voice acting. There's probably going to be new voice acting as well. And it's all going to be cleaned up for, modern hardware and, modern tech and everything. But I guess I heard that if you're a Halo purist, you can turn off all the new features that they add for this. I want to say Halo Reach was when they added the sprint button. I think it was Halo Reach. And it's like in the past too, if you wanted to zoom in, you had to click the right stick. And then, I think by Halo Reach, they moved it to the left trigger. So now, if you want, you can play with those modern control sensibilities, or if you want, you can just put it to old school, if that's how you remember it, and play it that way. So at least to give you options for both. There's also supposed to be 3 new prequel missions to play. There's no release date yet, but of course it's Going to be playable on the PS5, Xbox Series X, and PC sometime this year. They say 2026. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, I think, is coming out this year. This game has had a muddled history. The game was slated to be released years ago. It was being developed by a couple of Ubisoft studios in India, but it was taken away for whatever reason and rebooted by Ubisoft Montreal. So if you see some cutscenes and gameplay as of this recording, if you go on YouTube and see some cutscenes, it's not a reflection of what the game is supposed to look like. We have no idea what the new gameplay looks like. We've seen nothing as of yet. So if you look at the old stuff, it looks a bit rough. I mean, yeah. It looked like PS3 graphics, and this was in the PS4 generation, or at least late in the PS4 generation that we were supposed to get this. There was a website rebranding just recently, which leads many to us to believe that we're gonna see a release this year, or at the very least a major update. At the time, this game came out for the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox in 2003. So maybe, hopefully, we haven't seen a new. We saw what was it? A Prince of Persia game just come out, a side-scrolling kind of Metroidvania Prince of Persia game come out recently that was really good, but a full-on 3D Prince of Persia we haven't seen since the PS3 and 360 era. So, yeah, I'm trying to think. I think that was the last time. It was that kind of like cel-shaded looking Prince of Persia game, which I thought was good. So, Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly is seeing a full top-down remake this year as well. PS2 exclusive horror game that came out back in 2003, and this is by far one of the scariest horror games to have come out in that generation. In this game, you follow along twin sisters Miyu and Mayu as they traverse through a haunted Japanese village and uncover a curse that needs to be dispelled. Out of the trilogy that came out during this generation, this was by far the better one, which probably explains why they chose to remake this one instead of the first one. The game's coming out soon. This game's coming out March 12th for the PS5, Xbox Series, and the Switch 2. It's really cool. Gothic 1 is getting a full-on remake as well, set to come out this year sometime for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and the PC. And I got to say, out of all the remakes that need to happen, this one's probably the most necessary. The first Gothic game was pretty much a muddled mess and had a face only a mother could love. It had a dark storyline and interesting RPG features. It became a cult classic in a sense. And when you hear the phrase cult classic, it's almost like so bad it's good kind of thing. And like I said, a face only a mother could love. The remake is getting a big makeover with keeping some of the, third person RPG adventure jank intact a little bit. But, with a lot of quality of life improvements. I don't think it'll blow anyone's socks off, but for fans of the game that, this game came out in 2001, it might be a welcome change. So if you played this game, I didn't. I played it at a friend's house. I remember he had it, and I was like, even at that time, I was like, I don't think I want to continue playing this game. I'm not interested in this. So I saw a gameplay trailer for it. It looks interesting. I think the world itself is probably more of a draw than the gameplay, but the gameplay is kind of similar to the original. So I think it's not a full remake, but there are some rumors out there of potential remakes and remasters that may be coming out this year, but I wouldn't hold my breath. There's Silent Hill 1 remake is in the works, as is a Splinter Cell remake or maybe a reboot. We haven't heard anything about Splinter Cell in a long time, but they did say, I would say a couple years ago, that they're working on something. We're supposed to be getting a Max Payne 1 and 2 remake as well. Don't know if it's happening this year. As well as a Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which this one also had a troubled development, but we've been told that it's still on track to being made. So highly doubt this one's coming this year, but this one's been teased for quite a few years. So in terms of hardware, we got the Steam Machine coming out this year. And if you're a fan, if you've been keeping notes to the ground in terms of prices on RAM for PCs, this may not be the year to build a PC because RAM prices are going through the roof. And it's all because of these AI data centers that are just eating up all this RAM from these companies like, NVIDIA and stuff. And just now it's like the demand is high, but the supply is so low. So of course, who eats the repercussions of that? Not the companies, us customers, us consumers. So this may not be a good year to build a PC, and this is going to be a interesting. This is going to be an interesting time for the Steam machine to come out, because that's supposed to be a kind of like gaming PC. It's like a home console gaming PC, and it's supposed to be as beefy as the Steam Deck. And if RAM prices are the way they are, this may be a little bit more expensive than what you think. But they haven't announced the price yet, and we don't know, if the price is going to affect the final product of the Steam machine. They may, are they going to eat the cost, or are they going to have to price it appropriately? So we'll see. But there's also tons of new handhelds coming out this year, and I could make a whole episode, I feel, every week about all the new handhelds that are being announced and all the new pre-orders that are being up. But one of them I wanted to talk about was called the Iron Thor, and we talked earlier about how the 3DS is becoming more expensive to buy, but this one is a literal. I mean, it looks literally just like a Nintendo 3DS. Better analog sticks, OLED screens, everything like that. It's got some pretty strong hardware in it. It's got the ability to apparently play PlayStation 2 level games. It's got a 6-inch AMOLED top screen and an almost 4-inch AMOLED touchscreen at the bottom. Pretty robust CPU in it. I'm not going to bore you with specs, but pre-orders are available right now on their website, ayntech.com, AYNTEC.com. And it looks like there's plenty to go around. You could probably pre-order this, and it looks like batch 2 is on right now, and apparently they're supposed to be shipping batch 2 mid to late this month. And this is going for right now for like $250, $275. So you're probably getting stronger hardware than an original 3DS, and also paying less than what a 3DS XL costs. So this, if you're interested in getting a 3DS, this may be the best way to go. Something to think about. So I'm still thinking about picking one up. I was looking at the website and before recording, and I'm like, oh, this looks pretty cool. Ion, the company itself, has made a lot of good handhelds, and it's just one of the many companies out there that's making handhelds right now. And it's you can get so lost in the sauce of like what companies are making what now. And foldable screens are becoming popular, and these like flip screens too as well, because you got a lot of people that want to play DS games, and like I said earlier, there's not a lot of places to play DS games unless you buy original hardware. So what are you looking forward to in this list? Let me know. So that about wraps it up in this week's episode. Be sure to follow me on my social medias like X, Threads, and Instagram at RetroXPodcast. This podcast hits multiple different podcast platforms, so be sure to subscribe and enable notifications to ensure you listen to episodes the moment they drop. Full episodes are also now on YouTube at RetroX Podcast, so subscribe to my channel there. And thanks to the Hair of the Dogcast Network for allowing me to join their ranks, and I'll see you on the next episode.